Imagine you work as a recruiter from 9 to 5. You're quiet and reserved, you did what most people do. You got a good job in a good company, in a big city, mommy and daddy are proud of you, they didn't help with your college debt for nothing, and you make them even happier when you say you're gonna get married with your high school boyfriend. Life is absolutely wonderful. Until you realize that that 9 to 5 job isn't as fulfilling as you thought it would be, and that relationship with your husband isn't as great as you thought it would be. So you start your own business and you break up with the husband. The business is doing very well, money is coming in, and soon you need extra support. So you go to your parents and explain the situation. So mom, you're gonna have to make signs for my business, is that okay? What sort of sign, darling? Oh, okay. Wait, what does bonk means in that context? Well, basically it means that both are gonna... But that's not enough. So you go back to your ex-husband and ask him if he can help as well, and he says yes. Your business becomes so successful that you start to hear about the haters, the skeptics. That whole backlash leads to Australia, the country you moved to cancel your visa to protect that population. Isn't that crazy? Well, that's pretty much the story of Bunny Blue, the OnlyFans creator who built a family business around schoolies and barely legals and just got her visa to Australia cancelled. Since then, Bunny Blue has been going around podcasts explaining why what she's doing is perfectly legal and fine. I mean, it's true that Bunny Blue is actually more professional than most pitch providers. She says she asks participants for an ID and to fill a consent form. She also claims that she tells participants that they can change their mind before, during, and after the filming. A lot of pitch companies don't do that, even if they should, or are legally bound to. Pitch companies often end up in legal scandals. It's a very exploitative industry. On top of that, there have been some pretty significant changes in the past decade. The amount of amateur content published on platforms has skyrocketed. Big pitch websites have benefited from it. But the biggest winner here is OnlyFans. OnlyFans doesn't produce any content. It hosts and collects rent from creators, a 20% rent. That means that creators are independent and they sort of pay rent to the platform. The same way I pay rent to Google for hosting my videos, or Amazon sellers pay rent to Amazon for selling their products. So the economy at large is moving more and more towards rent. Companies make money through rent, and Bunny Blue operates her business in that context. The platform onto which she posts has some guidelines creators must follow, but Bunny's independence means that the platform cannot be held accountable if she does problematic things. That is very convenient for platforms, especially pitch platforms where a lot of problematic content is posted. So sure, Bunny seems to be doing things legally, but a lot of independent creators don't. In a pretty worrying documentary, the team of investigators working for the French program Cash Investigation showed the many problems of the pitch industry, especially on the content creator side. As independents, creators can generally post whatever they want. On some of the biggest pitch platforms, creators are only asked to confirm that the people involved in the videos consent and that they know that the video will be posted online. That's it. There is no test, you just have to click on the button and the video goes live. And so investigators found countless videos where people's consent to appear is questionable, and they also found videos where people clearly express that they do not want to be filmed. When reported, those videos often stay on the websites and continue to generate revenue for the creator and rent for the platform. Platforms make a ton of money out of those creators who don't have to deal with the same level of scrutiny as bigger pitch corporations. In some rare occasions, the creator might lose the right to monetize their content. But if you go check the videos, you'll see that they're still there, and you can still see ads on them. So do you understand what that means? Yes, some pitch platforms make even more money out of problematic content, because they don't even have to pay the creator its share of ad revenue. That's crazy, I know. But it is happening. I mean, we see and hear about the creators that do very well, but we have to keep in mind that those platforms, the gig economy platforms, are super exploitative. The fact that Bunny Blue's barely legal content works so well is precisely because there have been thousands of lower tier creators building that genre for years in barely legal ways. That's a euphemism. When you compete with other creators on the same platform run by very specific algorithms, You want to produce the most clickbait, the most sensational content. Smaller creators, new creators are willing to take risks with content that is not legal. As it has been made clear earlier, that content doesn't necessarily disappear from the platform, it just stays there. It builds the genre so that people like Bunny can capitalize on it in legal ways. It's much easier to keep peach corporations or established creators accountable because we can pressure them into changing their working conditions, the way they do things. But when it comes to amateur stuff, independent stuff, things get really, really tricky. The reason why things get tricky is because platforms don't do their job. And why would they? Unless they are legally pressured, they have no incentive in changing that model, changing that strategy. And even when they are legally pressured, they can still find a way to avoid taking responsibility and displace that responsibility onto independent creators. Bunny Blue is an independent creator, but she's pretty established now, and we can see it in the way people criticize her, keep her accountable. They see her as having an influence on that industry. That's why Bunny Blue puts so much emphasis on proving that what she's doing is legal, and to do so, she has used and abused the rhetoric of consent. 5 years after Me Too, the notion of consent has come to dominate public discussions on sex and intimacy. In August 2022, for example, Spain passed the Only Yes Means Yes sexual consent law. On top of that, schools and universities around the world have launched programs to educate the youth on consent and implemented regulations to sanction acts of misconduct. Even pickup artists, who are known in feminist circles for promoting street harassment and sexual assault, have upgraded post-Me Too era. In Men Who Hate Women, for example, Laura Bates writes about pickup artist Owen Kirk, who used to advocate physically grabbing women in public and practicing first on unattractive women to overcome the "this is not the behavior I'm supposed to be doing" block. In his videos following Me Too, Cook instead brags about teaching men, quote, how to approach girls respectfully without creeping them out, audaciously lamenting the fact that, quote, women are often bothered in the street by men who are unable to read their signals. Oh, thank you, Kirk. So considerate of you. Hundreds of self-help articles, podcasts, and videos have capitalized on the notion of consent, or a less heavy connoted phrase, setting boundaries. So you'll see self-proclaimed experts recommend that women, quote, own their power to bring him closer. They warn them that, quote, a lack of boundaries invites a lack of respect. Women need to be able to say no. They have to be able to tell people when it goes too far. They have to draw the line. In Tomorrow Sex Will Be Good Again, Catherine Angel argues that what she calls consent culture operates exactly the same way as confidence culture. She writes, consent places the burden of good sexual interaction on women's behavior, on what they want and on what they can know and say about their wants, on their ability to perform a confident sexual self in order to ensure that sex is mutually pleasurable and non-coercive. The dating app Bumble, founded in 2014 by Tinder co-founder Whitney Wolfe Herd, is a very good example of that. Herd claimed that everything they do at Bumble is driven by female empowerment. Originally on the app, women would send a message first, so they had the power, they were in control. Men couldn't access them without their enthusiastic consent. But all that so-called female empowerment is limited to the initial text. Bumble only disrupts one aspect of what philosopher Amya Srinivasan called the informal regulatory system of gendered sexual expectations. In it, you can put things like women who excite men need to finish the job, or a guy who comes back home from the bar without any girl is a loser. Taking into account those gendered sexual expectations means that we have to complexify the way we understand consent. The belief that enthusiastic consent is the solution to solve the problem of sexual violence is very flawed, because how do you know when you don't know? Well, Srinivasan would probably argue that most women answer by following gendered sexual expectations. Because of that, women can retrospectively feel violated for having done things they did not want to do. That frustration and sometimes anger is then turned to the self for not being able to set those boundaries, like that expert on YouTube told you to. But it can also turn to the partner, who ultimately doesn't have to deal with any of that and can even benefit in a way from those gendered expectations. Now that's what I wrote in my essay Collapse Feminism, but obviously the situation here is a little bit different. Bonnie Blue is an adult woman working with all types of men, including very young men. In fact, she built her business out of getting young men, including barely legals, in environments where peer pressure is intense to film peach videos that will probably stay on the internet forever. This dynamic is clearly predatory, but the gender inversion has led some people to celebrate what she's doing. #girlboss. On top of that, Bonnie Blue tries to appease the haters by claiming that what she's doing is educating those young boys who don't know a thing about sex. She says she explains them what consent is, that they can ask her to stop anytime, but also that if something doesn't feel right, she can say no. She said on multiple occasions that she wants to keep it real by getting those young and experienced boys who make a ton of mistakes so that other people can learn from that and feel less intimidated by peach in general. Problem is that it shouldn't be those boys' job to educate people. We live in a society where people's relationship with their body, with sexuality, is still kind of difficult at times. It can be a bit taboo, so putting yourself out there publicly is a pretty big deal. Bonnie Blue, contrary to a lot of people, is totally fine with it. She's known for having very open conversations about peach and sex in general. She doesn't find those topics taboo. She doesn't moralize her work. She doesn't glamorize it or downplays the bad side. She just says it as it is. For me, she embodies the phrase sex work is work because she talks about it as a normal job, with legal rules that she abides to. But because she encourages us to adopt that lens, that work lens, then she kind of forces us to ask questions like, why don't those boys receive any money for the work they are doing? Are you going to pay those people who make your business so profitable? Sure, we could say that those guys are dumb for not asking for money. Or we could say that it's ridiculous that men are conditioned to jump on any occasion to have sex, that having sex with a girl is the profitable transaction to them. They won't ask for more. They're already very happy that they don't have to pay for it with money or gifts or drinks or restaurants, like it is often the case in heteronormative context. No, they feel like it's a totally fair transaction, being filmed, being put on the internet, probably for the rest of your life. Actually, I want to read you what the collective Teach Us Consent, check out their page, they're really good. They put up this post on the topic of Bonnie Blue, and here's what they say. These are predators capitalizing on a dangerous culture where boys are conditioned through adolescence by mainstream porn to view any sexual encounter as their ticket to validation and manhood. And there is definitely a view that if you haven't had sex for the first time before schoolies, you better have by the end. Like, you can't truly be an adult or man if you haven't had sex. Yes, and it also feeds into the stereotype that men are always ready to go and sex-obsessed, which doesn't support us to understand that men can say no and be victims of sexual assault too. That brings us back to Amya Srinivasan's idea of the informal regulatory system of gendered sexual expectations. Now a new rule can be added. Men should never miss an opportunity to have sex with a woman. Bonnie Blue, like most of the peach industry, capitalizes on that informal regulatory system of gendered sexual expectations. And the victims this time are inexperienced teenagers. She claims that those boys leave her feeling super confident and ready to be sexually active. And in the context of a so-called crisis of masculinity, that work, what she's doing, could be understood as a form of community work. I mean, I'm not inventing it, she says it herself. She calls it community work. This is coherent with demands by some politicians and commentators for a right to sex, meaning that men should be entitled to receive sexual attentions by, guess who? Women. For many heterosexual couples, the right to sex is an already built-in feature of their relationship. It's always good to remind ourselves that legislation on marital rape is very new, because it was the norm to think that wives and girlfriends owe sex to their partner. Consent wasn't part of the equation. Bonnie Blue herself said that she understands that men want to cheat on their wives if they don't give them the attention that they want, so she understands that sex is a requirement of the heterosexual couple contract. Now that there is actual legislation around consent, the idea of the right to sex has gained a little bit of popularity. Most of it comes from the right and the far right, but some progressives have also embraced this idea. For example, self-defined progressive politician Alexandra Hunt once declared on her Twitter feed that, quote, "We should be moving toward a right to sex. People should be able to have sex when they feel they want to, and we need to develop services that meet people's needs. That sort of thing already exists in countries like the Netherlands, where people with disabilities can easily access sex workers' services. In that sense, sex work becomes community work. Editing Alice's hair, I just wanted to make sure that what I said here was very clear. What I mean by community work is precisely this article that you see on screen on the educational needs, motives and experiences of care workers for people with disabilities in the Netherlands. So this is really serious. Those people are trained, they are educated on how to provide the best care possible. However, the right to sex, as Alexandra Hunt or Andrew Tate's fans understand it, is much closer to a Handmaid's Tale situation where women's bodies are used as tools for regulating societal problems like falling birth rates or the threat of sex-deprived men. To conclude, Bonnie Blue's approach of the peach industry is nothing truly revolutionary. You know, it reminds me of what we said earlier with pickup artist Owen Kirk, who upgraded after Me Too to tell men that they should be able to read signals and stop harassing women in the streets. So yeah, sure, Bonnie Blue asked for ID and gave consent forms, something that most peach providers don't actually do. And sure, she's a woman winning in an industry where women are often exploited, but that's only pastel progressivism. Bonnie Blue just puts a pastel girl boss filter onto the informal regulatory system of gendered sexual expectations. She puts a pastel girl boss filter on problematic practices enabled by platforms that displace any form of responsibility onto content creators. So sure, Bonnie Blue should be criticized and kept accountable, but our skepticism has to extend beyond Bonnie Blue and also include platforms. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, the conversation continues in the comment section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe if it's not already done. Now I need to introduce you to the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to grow your presence online. They give you a bunch of tools to create your ideal websites. So this is mine so far, Alice Cappelleyt. I use it as a platform to kind of show all the work that I do on YouTube, my contributions, but also my book. I also added all my social media accounts. You also have analytical tools. You can run effective email campaigns. On their website, you can also get advice from professionals on how to build your website, etc. So many things you can do. So if you're interested in it, if you want to try it out, then go to squarespace.com to get a free trial. And once you're ready to go public, then you can go to squarespace.com/AliceCappelleyt to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you to my patrons for their support, and a special thank to top-tier patrons Wolfcut, Sebastian, Gazi Chic, Neil Verma, Patrick Button, Devish Mohan Meena, Jeff Lee, Yilan, Tayeb Matin, Nick, Brandon, James, Ojwal, Pablo, Patrick, Boris, Ria, Ivan, Donaj, Ian, Alex, Toki, Koriji, Tristan, Patricia, Manuel, Christopher, and Perry. And thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. That's it. Salut!